We're going to go ahead and get started with our small group today. What we're focusing on today is fluency while reading out loud, okay? So what I've done here is I've looked at your most recent fluency passages, and I have found that we're not quite on grade level. Samantha, you have 122 words correct per minute, but you made approximately 10 mistakes out of the 132 words that you attempted. Tia, you have 134 words correct, so you were a little farther along than Samantha, but you still made a total of 7 errors out of the 143 that you attempted. Okay, now in order to be on grade level, you need to read approximately 175 words correct per minute. So we have some room that we need to improve on, okay? So what we're going to do is 2 different strategies today. I'm going to do a choral reading with you where we read together, and then we're going to do like an echo reading where you listen and you follow along with whatever I've said, okay? Now before we get started on our activity, I want you guys to take your pencils and up here in the top corner of your paper, write down on a scale of 1 to 3 what you think you feel you are with reading out loud. And I'm going to tell you my scale. A 0 is I am nowhere close to grade levelness. 1 is I'm close, but I keep making mistakes. 2 is I'm really close to grade level, but still make at least 3 or 4 mistakes. And 4 is I'm on grade level and make no mistakes at all. So based on what I just said, you tell me where you think you are. Okay, yeah, we're roughly about 2. We're close, but we're not quite there yet, okay? So, I'm going to practice with you guys I'm going to read something out loud just to let you see what it sounds like. Now, fluency has 4 different aspects. We have speed and rate, we have accuracy, and we have, sorry, let me grab myself here. We have your appropriate expression. That means you can like change your voice to make it sound like if it's really exciting, like you get really loud, or you can get really sad and it's supposed to be quiet. And we have, of course, comprehension. Do you understand what it is that you're reading? And a lot of people simply fly through it, but they have no idea what they're saying. Some people understand, but in order to understand, they read at a slower pace. Some people have that's right around the right pace, but kind of mess up a couple of words, which will hinder comprehension. And it looks like that's kind of where we're at with ours. Because you guys got, pretty far, just weren't all the way there. Okay? So I'm going to start, and I'm going to read a passage to you. And I want you guys to follow along with me. And on your paper, I want you to make a chart over here on the side. I want you to put a box for any time that I stumble on a word. I want you to put a circle around a word that I said incorrectly. I want you to do a little, like the little carrot thing. Anytime you see in here where I add a word in that's not supposed to be there. And then I want you to underline any time that I, run my words together, like I say them all as one big word, okay? All right, so I'm going to read for 1 minute. I'm going to take my watch off and time myself. And anytime you hear a mistake on my part, mark it down for me, and then we'll talk about it, okay? All right, so this is the Telltale Heart. I'm going to wait for this to get right here. The second one starts now. It was a low, dull, quick sound. It sounded like a watch wrapped in cotton. I gasped for breath. Still, the police officers did not hear it. I talked faster and louder, but the noise kept increasing. I stood up and moved around. I talked about things that were not important. I spoke in a high voice and I used violent gestures, but the noise kept getting louder. Why would they not be gone? I walked back and forth on the floor with heavy steps, but the noises kept getting louder. Oh, God, what can I do? The noises grew louder, 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 and still the men chatted pleasantly and then smiled. Was it possible that they didn't hear the sound? Almighty God, oh no, no, no. They heard. They suspected. They knew. They were making fun of me. this is what I thought, and this is what I still think. Okay, and that's my minute. Okay, so take a minute, think about, did I add any words? Did I say any words incorrectly? Or did it sound okay? Well, I know that I added in a word.
No.
Yeah, I added in an extra no. So I'm gonna mark that in my spot because I just remember saying that, and I know that I messed up right here. I said noises grew louder and louder. I know I messed up, but you know what? I'm not perfect. Nobody is. If you can read it perfectly every single time, awesome for you. But it's not always the case. Okay, so even I make mistakes. But the point is that I read. You could hear my inflection when it got really exciting. Like, why could they not leave? I got excited.
When it was, slower, I slowed down, and I understood what I read. Excuse me. And I got to about 148 words. So even Miss Himschoot's not quite on grade level all the time when it's a passage that I've never seen before. Okay, so I want us to practice this together. So I want you to take this paper and move it off to the side or put it under your staff here. And move your staff here. And we're going to read The Babysitter. Okay. Now this is going to be our echo reading. That means I'm going to read some, and then you're going to read it right after me. You're going to read exactly what I said and try to mimic what I say. Okay? So here we go. Still puzzled, she went over to the plate. Oh, goodness, let me start that over. Still puzzled, she went over to the plate of cookies, and as she got close, she stepped into something cold and wet. She looked down. There was a puddle on the floor, soaking into her right sock. An icy cold puddle. Hillary looked out the kitchen window. It was raining. Okay, now I want Tia, you to go first.
Still puzzled, she went over to the plate of cookies, and as she got close, she stepped into something cold and wet. She looked down. There was a puddle on the floor, soaking into her right sock. An ice-cold puddle. Hillary looked out the kitchen window. It was raining.
Okay? Your turn.
Still puzzled, she went over to a plate of cookies, and as she got close, she stepped into something cold and wet. She looked down. There was a puddle on the floor, soaking into her right sock, an icy cold puddle. Hillary looked out the kitchen window. It was raining.
All right. So not too bad. Let's go one more shot at it, and then I'll have you guys practice with the choral reading where we'll read it together. Okay? So I'm going to read just a little bit more of this passage, and then we'll go over. All right. It starts. Someone was in the house. She didn't want to believe it, but there was no other explanation. Her whole body felt cold, and she could feel her heart stuttering in her chest. She thought about the twins sleeping upstairs, how she had told them she was hired to make sure nothing bad happened to them. But what if something bad happened to her? Okay. Tia?
Someone was in the house. She didn't want to believe it, but there was no other explanation. Her whole body felt cold, and she could feel her heart stuttering in her chest. She thought about the twins sleeping upstairs, how she had told them she was hired to make sure nothing bad happened to them. But what if something bad happens to her?
Okay, now spell that. Instead of listening to what she just read, I'm going to read you the rest of it. Okay? She shuddered and looked across the room. The telephone was hanging by the refrigerator. She could try and phone for help, or she could run outside and go to the nearest house. The Mitchells lived down a long driveway, and it was about a quarter mile to the next house, and dark and wet, and she didn't know how many someones were in the house or outside, and maybe it was all her imagination. Okay?
She shuddered and looked across the room. The telephone was hanging by the refrigerator. She could try and phone for help, or she could run outside to go to the nearest house. The Mitchells lived down a long driveway, and it was about a quarter mile to the next home, and dark and wet. And she didn't know how many someones were in the house or outside, or maybe it was her all her imagination.
Make sure you guys are working over there. Okay, so even with just the choral reading, or excuse me, the echo reading, we have a couple of mistakes, but we're getting a lot better.
I've only saw that Tia, you had 2 mistakes, and Samantha, you had 3 real mistakes. But that's fine. It's a lot less than what you had over here in the first time. So we're doing okay. So now let's switch over, and we're going to look at the interlopers. Okay. Now the interlopers is a little more difficult than the babysitter. Okay. They've got some names in here that are, kind of funny. So I'm going to tell you the names ahead of time, so when we read it together, we're okay with it. So this one is Ulrich von Gradwitz. Okay, say that one with me. Ulrich von Gradwitz. Okay, and then down here we have George Znay. So George Znay, M at the end, Znay. Okay, so now what we're going to do is read together. Okay, so we're just going to do that choral reading. When we're finished reading together, I'm going to have you guys go and practice, and then you can come back and we'll work on it together, okay? All right, so let's start. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Ulrich von Gradwitz found himself stretched on the ground. One arm lay numb beneath him, and the other was pinned helplessly in a tight tangle of forked branches. Both his legs were pinned beneath the fallen branches, and it was obvious that he could not move without someone releasing him. The falling branches had slashed his face and had to wink away blood from his eyelashes
Before he could see the full disaster. At his side, near enough to touch, lay George Znay, who was alive and struggling, but obviously as helplessly pinned down as himself. All around him lay the thick wreckage of splintered branches and broken twigs. Feeling a mixture of relief at being alive and exasperation at being trapped, Ulrich muttered a strange medley of thankful prayers and sharp curses. George, who was blinded by the blood in his eyes, stopped struggling for a moment to listen. Then he gave a short, snarling laugh. "So you're not killed as you ought to be, but you're caught anyway," he cried. "Trapped, what a joke. Ulrich von Gradwitz trapped in his stolen forest. That's justice for you." And he laughed again, mockingly and savagely. "I'm caught on my own land," retorted Ulrich. "When my men come to release us, you will wish you hadn't been caught poaching on a neighbor's land. Shame on you." Okay, so we've done it now together. I'm going to read it one more time out loud, just so you guys can hear what it should sound like, without everybody kind of mumbling through it. Then I'm going to send you guys back. I'll let you sit either here quietly, or you can go back to your desks, and you're going to practice this a couple of times, and then we're going to come back and read it together, okay? So here we go. Ulrich von Gradwitz found himself stretched on the ground. One arm lay numb beneath him, and the other was pinned helplessly in a tight tangle of forked branches. Both his legs were pinned beneath the fallen branches, and it was obvious that he could not move without someone releasing him. The falling branches had slashed his face, and he had to wink away blood from his eyelashes before he could see the full disaster. At his side, near enough to touch, lay George Znay, who was alive and struggling, but obviously as helplessly pinned down as himself. All around them lay the thick wreckage of splintered branches and broken twigs. Feeling a mixture of relief at being alive and exasperation at being trapped, Ulrich muttered a strange medley of thankful prayers and sharp curses. George, who was blinded by the blood in his eyes, stopped struggling for a moment to listen. Then he gave a short, snarling laugh. "So you're not killed as you ought to be, but you're caught anyway," he cried. "Trapped. What a joke.
Ulrich von Gradwitz trapped in his stolen forest. That's justice for you. And he laughed again, mockingly and savagely. I'm caught on my own land, retorted Ulrich. When my men come to release us, you will wish you hadn't been caught poaching on a neighbor's land. Shame on you. Okay, so we've tried our choral reading together. We did it, we did our talk back and forth and our echo reading. So now what I want you to do is a repeated reading. You're going to go practice this at your desk, where you can sit here and just kind of separate. But I want you to read through this 5 times in your head and out loud. That way, when you come back, we're ready to go and you guys can knock it out. Okay? And zero mistakes. Okay? All right, I'll let you get to work.